to the first episode of yet another startup podcast. This is a show that my co-host, and I started today. My name is Kamran Rahman, and I'll hand off to Akhil here in a second to give his intro. But before we do that, I wanted to give a quick background on this podcast and why we started it. I think I would at least consider myself a technologist. I am a startup, bootstrap enthusiast. I have, however, very little experience doing either of those two things. Nonetheless, I figured I could still talk about the topic. And this podcast will be covering startups, technology in general, and probably some, more controversial personalities that are at the fringes of the technology sphere. And then personally, as for me, I've been working in technology for the last 10 years, mostly working on enterprise and consumer applications, mix of e-commerce and some other like consulting oriented gigs. I have a little bit of experience working in a startup a long time ago. I'm about to start at a really big startup in about a couple days, but that's essentially me. I'll hand off to Akhil so he can give his intro.
I'm Akhil Chandan. I currently am reluctant to use this, but I'm a tech lead at a successful startup right now. I'm reluctant because Cam has recently shown me tech lead on YouTube. But anyways, I have done a few startups previously of varying success. None that I would consider successful as they haven't had like exits or anything like that, but varying success as in we've gotten to incubators, gotten customers on board and things of that nature. So I'm fairly familiar with the startup process, as well as software development in general. So I'm hoping I can bring that expertise to talk about some really interesting things here.
Thank you, Mr. Chandon. So in this episode, so the whole impetus of this podcast was Akhil shared this long ass video on YouTube by some guy named Coffezilla, and Coffezilla interviews this. I mean, according to the internet, this entrepreneur named Evan Luthra, based out of India, and it's really this 90-minute video of Coffezilla kind of um, really like reaming Evan Luthra about a lot of the claims Evan makes, and whatnot. And I think I watched like the first couple minutes of the video, and then I was like, man, this is way too long. And then over like a period of many workouts, like I would like just listen to the YouTube video without actually watching it. I finished like the full 90 minutes, and I was thinking, wow, Akhil is right. Like this is interesting and kind of scandalous, or seems scandalous. I don't want to make any judgment calls. Oh, by the way, before we go any further, um, this is just, this podcast and this episode is just two guys shooting the shit. Don't take anything seriously or professionally in any way. So, and also lastly, Evan Luthra, if you're listening to this and you want to come on and, you know, respond back to anything that we discover or say, you're more than welcome to shoot us a message. So with that said, I'm going to hand off to Akhil, who is really the one to have discovered this Coffeezilla YouTube video
Yeah,
with Evan Luthra.
I've dove pretty deep into this rabbit hole. But first of all, I think Coffeezilla did a pretty good job of interviewing him and kind of finding that balance of not holding back and asking tough questions and pressing him, and also not like being rude enough that he just leaves and doesn't want to answer the questions, right? So I think Coffeezilla did a good job there. What I'm trying to bring, the things I want to dive deep into a little bit is like the things that I know from a technological aspect that could have shined light on some things that Coffeezilla may or may not know. Um, that's first off. Second off, I was a little skeptical even going into this. I didn't first discover Evan Luthra through Coffeezilla. I actually found like his Instagram page or something like that. And I was like, wow, 1 million followers. From his pictures, it seems like he has a lot of wealth. I wonder what's going on here. And I did a little deep dive. I think that's because, sadly, for me, being of Indian heritage, there's a context out there right now with successful people from India and scams going hand in hand. So that raised a little bit of like, huh. It made me perk my eyebrow up and want to see if this guy's one of those as well. So yeah, why don't we jump into a little bit of a timeline and let's see whether he pass or fails our Indian scam categorization.
Sounds
So
good.
So to begin with, in the interview as well as just diving in on his life story, we created a sort of timeline. So what we're gonna do here is basically kind of tell the timeline of his view of his life, and then also discuss whether it's an accurate portrayal or not, I guess, of his success. So he makes claims first that he has created apps that went to the App Store. He was in the first 500 of the App Store, and also that he was mentored by Steve Jobs. So let's start off with that there. I feel like I've been talking for a while, so Cam, maybe you want to give your thoughts, a little synopsis on those things for us.
Yeah, so I think, and I might have to correct my facts if they're wrong, but from what I recall, at least in that interview with Coffezilla, and along with at least 2 or 3 other interviews with Evan Luthra that are not related to Coffezilla, the consistent narrative I was hearing was that in 2008 or 2009, Evan Luthra started releasing apps to the App Store. So this is, I think, at the age of, I think like 12 or 13 years old, he was doing that. And he mentioned that he was one of the first 500 iOS apps to be on the App Store. And that was one area, like, I kinda, like, that stuck with me. I was wondering, does iOS actually, like, publish here, as kind of a retrospective, like, "Hey, we're celebrating 10 years on the App Store. These were the first, 10 or 100 apps
Yeah.
to ever go live," or anything like that. Just any evidence that would help back what Evan was mentioning, and I couldn't actually find anything, like, on Google. It's not like I was using some, like, scholarly, like, journal database to find this stuff. There's not a lot of stuff out there like that about Evan Luthra to begin with. Um, so I couldn't find anything. I couldn't find the names of any of those early apps that he mentioned. Like, he doesn't actually like if it was the first one of the first 500 in the App Store. I mean, like, there isn't even a name he provides that I can actually go validate. So I couldn't find anything that would prove this. And what makes it difficult is from with this argument is he's saying he had one of the first 500 in the App Store, but at the same time, there's nothing that there's nothing that explicitly says no, that's not true. But
Yeah,
you
yeah, and
know,
I think like, sorry, go ahead.
no, that's it. That's it. Go for it. Go for it.
I was gonna say like the second part of that, just based on the Coffeezilla interview and a couple other things. So he varies a little bit from saying he was 15 and in 2010 released his first app into the App Store when he was 15 years old. And this is what Coffeezilla does into the App Store was released in 2008. So like in 2 years, only having less than 500 apps on the App Store when it was considered a huge success is very, very um, hard to believe. I think you can realistically say that's not true. And then Evan Luthra goes on to clarify that he was on LinkedIn's blogging platform called Pulse in 2008. That was one of the first apps in the App Store, and his involvement with Pulse was publishing some sort of article that he had written that got onto Pulse about technology.
Okay, so then what I'm understanding, if I'm going to kind of reiterate, you tell me if I'm understanding this incorrectly or not. So LinkedIn Pulse, which was which at one point was a separate blogging platform, content publication platform, that was one of the first 500 apps in the iOS store.
Right.
Evan Luthra was a contributor on that LinkedIn Pulse platform. And because LinkedIn Pulse was one of the first 500 iOS apps in the App Store, then that also means that Evan was responsible for publishing one of the first 500 iOS apps in the App Store. Am I kind of following like the logical conclusion?
Yeah, that's his
Okay.
logic there, and my counterpoint a little bit is like every 13-year-old in 2008 was on Facebook, and Facebook was on like the first 500 in the App Store. So that basically means every 13-year-old in the United States can make the same claim, right? Like,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. This is like the thing with this is if you apply enough filters to something, then you could eventually say I'm the first to do this because of all these criteria. And I think what I'm seeing here is it's very possible. Like you could make that argument that I think that we're interpreting Evan is making, but the way that it's being portrayed is not portrayed that way. You know.
yeah, yeah.
So
It is a bit misleading, especially like you're changing the goalposts a few times, right? From being like, I was one of the first 500 in the App Store, then saying when I said that, I meant I was a contributor on a blog that was one of the first 500 in the App Store, which is a lot, its magnitude's less impressive. So, secondly, along with that, he mentions that he has created apps that were in the highest rated before. Um, which include a Two and a Half Men app that was not officially licensed by Two and a Half Men, and an Indian cricket app as well. Not sure if it's Indian cricket or just a cricket league app where you can see scores. But he also mentions that wasn't officially licensed. Yeah, so basically for that part, that's also a bit misleading to call yourself one of the highest downloaded there. Um, as Coffezilla mentions, there were 0 reviews, and those apps got taken down within a week or two. So what that means to me is, I if I was in Evan Luthra's shoes, I created an app that I knew would get a high amount of downloads before it got taken off due to it being high in search results, right? I can create a
yeah.
LeBron James app without LeBron James's permission. A bunch of people would download it because they're looking for content about LeBron James, and then it'd get taken off. And for the rest of my life, I would be able to use this badge of creating an application that got to the top rated charts or top downloaded charts.
Yeah, you know what it can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so what it's like is back in the day, um when people would try to get their websites, web pages to the top of like the search results, they would do like a lot of those people would do essentially like frowned upon practices like keyword stuffing. So, for example, if you're like an up and coming rapper who's doing that on the side, but your day job is like your dentist or something like that, but you want to show up.
I think it cut out again, Cam, but that was a really good reference that I enjoyed that I think only me and Cam will understand about rappers and their side hobbies of being dentists.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, now I can.
How about now?
Perfect.
Okay, so what it's like is it's like you're that kind of rapper, and then you launch the first iOS app, and it's called like the 50 Cent rapper app, and then now you're saying, and that's if this is like 2004, 2005, that's likely, and this is obviously before the App Store, but if the App Store existed then, because of all the popularity around 50 Cent at the time, yeah, it's like likely that because your app is named that it's going to show up at the top, and then now you can make that kind of claim and associate it with yourself, even though you have nothing to do with 50 Cent the rapper. So that was a common kind of black hat, gray hat approach towards getting towards the top of the search results on like Google back in the day. And to be honest, like the way that this Two and a Half Men scenario it sounds like exactly the same kind of thing. And then it's being used to basically say like I had like a top app for like X amount of time before it got taken down.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And now that you brought that up, it just reminded me. It's like something that people do on Instagram now, even if they're an aspiring artist, right? They'll put like hashtag Drake, hashtag Nicki Minaj in like their posts so that when people search for those things, it'll show up, even though it's not related at all, and it's just them self-promoting their content. So it's kind of in like a similar vein, except I think even more like even further. I don't know if like extortion of their brand is what I'm looking for, but essentially it seems like that's what it is.
Yeah. Well, one of the other things that we have listed here is also I won't speak too much about the Indian cricket app because one, I think cricket is hella boring. so I didn't bother looking into that too much. But I will speak to like the Delhi Metro claim. So I think in from what I recall, one of the interviews, it might have been the Coffezilla interview, might have been another one with Evan Luthra. Evan mentions that he had the first app for Delhi Metro, right? So I think I consider myself reasonably intelligent, at least of like uh, average intelligence. And so, well, I know that India is one of the biggest countries in the world, and that Delhi is also one of the most populated cities in India. It's the capital. So I assume, well, if him or one of his companies published the first after Delhi Metro, I'd be able to find something online. And I tried looking, like do a Google search for like double quotes Delhi Metro and then double quotes Evan Luthra, and I couldn't find anything that supported that claim. And if I did find anything, it looked like it was a claim from like directly from content either published or like sponsored by Evan Luthra. So I wasn't able to validate that either. So I don't see enough evidence to actually believe that like it was just like he published the first app for Delhi Metro. I think there's probably a lot more to it that we don't know that would otherwise disqualify or invalidate that claim.
Yeah, yeah. Just a side comment on that I just thought of. I think we're like probably 15 minutes in this episode, and between me calling most successful people in India scammers and Cam saying cricket's boring, I feel like we're isolating a lot of our listeners. So I just want to make a point of going
Look,
out there.
yeah. Well, to be fair, cricket's only boring to me because sports is boring to me in general. I don't watch sports at all. So I think the reason cricket is especially boring is, from what I understand, that game can go on for multiple days, which just means I'm going to be bored for more than 3 hours. So
Fair enough. Fair
yeah.
enough. Did you have more on that topic of the App Store? The App Store, or
Um, I have nothing else around like his like earliest, I guess, app creations. I think we're good to go on to like his um I guess his proclaimed like what do you call it, accomplishments.
I think
Uh
there's one part that we didn't touch on yet that's pretty important, and that's him being mentored by Steve Jobs.
oh right, yeah, how could I forget?
Yeah.
So yeah, so so according to Evan Luthra's mentor was Steve Jobs. And of course I think to myself, wow, I didn't even know there was a relationship between the two of them. And so, Akil, you're pretty familiar with what the context was, or is, not even was, is behind that claim. You wanna shed some light on that?
Yeah, yeah. So before the Coffeezilla interview, the context that he provides when he makes this claim is simply, I was mentored by Steve Jobs, right? So Coffeezilla presses him a little bit and gets some of the history behind this context. And Evan goes on to say that he studied Steve Jobs, read everything he wrote, and listened to a lot of interviews by him, and therefore he feels like he can consider himself a mentor because he learned things from him, which is quite a bit disingenuous in my opinion. Cam, do you have any initial thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I mean, from what I recall, didn't Evan mention that he had like one phone call with Steve Jobs?
Yeah, yeah. He says he has one phone call where Steve Jobs apparently asked him how the App Store was doing or how he liked the App Store.
Yeah, so like there's like limited context, which once again makes it difficult to like. Well, I'll say put it this way: the limited context makes it easier for me to disqualify the claim versus believe it, right? So there's like two parts to this. There's one part where like you as a person are studying and following somebody else who you've never met. I think if if you think you've established some relationship with someone without ever meeting them, but just by like reading their content, like following them online, that to me sounds somewhat even stalker. Like I'm not saying that this is a stalker situation, but the only time I've ever heard like this kind of theme is when I'm like listening to a crime podcast or watching a crime show about stalkers.
I can kind of disagree there though, just because I feel like a lot of people can consider themselves Steve Jobs as their mentor. Then, right? Like, I've read a book about the autobiography of Steve Jobs and listened to some interviews. Did he mentor me to a less capacity? Maybe if Evan Luthra read everything, right? And like, I think a lot of people that are deeply in like the Christian faith would say that Jesus is their mentor then, but that really just means that you're a Christian. You know what I mean?
that,
Like
yeah,
it doesn't have any merit on success whatsoever.
that's true. Now, as for the phone call that he had with Steve Jobs, it's very possible that he had that phone call with Steve Jobs. Unfortunately, on that Coffeezilla interview, like there wasn't a ton of context about that phone call. So, like for example, I could assume that Evan Luthra dialed into an Apple share like earnings meeting where all stockholders can dial into and listen, right? And maybe
Right.
Steve Jobs asked on the call, and maybe it was not even directed at Evan, maybe it was a general question, or maybe it was directed at somebody who's actually participating in that meeting. How's the App Store doing, or something like that? It could
It,
be something as far fetched as that, but I couldn't, or it could be completely true. Like Evan Luthra picked up the phone and like dialed Steve
I
Jobs,
actually
and
think it's much less far-fetched because it could have been a rhetorical question. Like, at this time where he says the phone call took place, the App Store was incredibly successful already, right? So I don't think it's unbelievable that he could have gone to an earnings report meeting and been like, "How do you guys like that App Store?" Trying to get everybody hyped up and clapping, right? It seems pretty plausible to me.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So I would be more likely to believe that as opposed to I had a one-on-one call with Steve Jobs and now he's my mentor. Yeah. So I personally don't believe that.
Yeah, yeah, 100% agree. Cam, do you want to take the next part about his kind of achievements that he leans on and what those entail?
Yeah, so I'll start off with at least what I saw on LinkedIn and some other interviews. Evan has, I think, an honorary doctorate in blockchain technology and I think cryptocurrency, which are two inevitably tightly coupled subdisciplines of technology. And speaking specifically to like that claim, so from what I understand, he sponsored, I think, a room or a research center or like a computer lab at some school or university in the Dominican Republic. And him
Right.
sponsoring that they awarded him the honorary doctorate of like blockchain technology and cryptocurrency. Now, I think like that is totally fair. Like if you got this honorary doctorate in blockchain and cryptocurrency, and you've kind of caveated with like, yeah, this is honorary. Like I don't actually know a ton about the details of the technology, but rather I'm an enthusiast of the technology. I think that'd be one thing. But I've definitely seen at least one interview, not with Coffeezilla, where Evan literally opens up with, "I have a PhD in the industry." And I was
Yeah.
like, that's kind of different than like having an honorary PhD. On top of that, I'm a big like blockchain and cryptocurrency enthusiast myself. So probably for like the two people that might be listening to this that are also into it, like you might be familiar with people like Vitalik Buterin, who's I think one of the founders of Ethereum, or like I don't remember his last name, but he's Greek and his first name is Andres. This guy is like a huge Bitcoin maximalist, and he has I'm pretty sure he actually has like a PhD in like distributed computing and distributed systems. And generally speaking, people who are legitimately educated in that space, what I found is like the big personalities, a lot of them tend to be educated in like distributed systems and computing, and they have like papers and things to kind of back up that education. And not even those guys have I ever seen them kind of open up with, oh, I have the highest level of education in this space. So when Evan opens up with something like that, I definitely feel like that's an embellishment of what his title actually is. And
Yeah.
and like an example is Richard Branson goes by Richard Branson. Sure, like on Wikipedia, it might be listed as Sir Richard Branson, but I don't know if I don't I've never seen Richard Branson actually use being knighted as like, oh, like I was knighted because I did all the things to become a knight and therefore I'm a knight. I've never actually seen him kind of parading around like that. So that's an example of somebody who got some sort of honorary title without, maybe doing, I don't even know what it takes to become a knight. So I don't think he did anything that would require being a knight, but I don't see him embellishing his title or his name either.
Yeah,
Branson at least.
yeah. And on that point, Evan Luthra writes on multiple different like social media places or media outlets that he refers to himself as Dr. Evan Luthra, right? Which is like a pretty big context behind this as well. You're trying to use your honorary doctorate status to get some credibility behind you, right? And
Yeah.
what I just thought of now is it's like me going to India and saying like, as a 9-year-old, I was acclaimed by the president of the United States for my like how good I was at studying and my education, right? Where like I don't know if you remember this too, or they went through that. Pretty much like everybody in 6th grade would just get some certificate of achievement signed by the
Oh
president.
yeah. Yeah, totally. I totally remember that.
It's
Yeah.
like it's kind of like that where there's just an additional step where everybody doesn't get it, but you have to pay some X amount of money, and then the university will recognize you for donating that much.
Oh, dude, I don't know if you ever remember, but like at least when I was in high school. So first off, I was a terrible student. I had like a 2.5. Like intellectually, I had like low self-esteem because I didn't have good grades. So I just never thought of myself as like a smart person. And
Right.
what I would get like once a year was like, oh, you're recognized for being one of the top high schoolers in the United States. And if you pay $50, you'll get this book with your name in it, and it'll be listed around along with all the other high schoolers that are like the best in the country. And
Right.
I mean, it's like not one to one, but I could have like totally been like, I'll pay that $50, and now I can say I'm like, one of the top high schoolers in the United States. And I kind of whatever Evan did is at obviously at a larger scale because he got like I don't know if that university in the Dominican Republic is accredited, but it's obviously well enough to have that, like probably established enough to have that name. So I think whatever Evan did is probably at a larger scale than like 15-year-old me coughing up $50 to get like a high school like national high school recognition.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'm basically agreeing with you on that.
Yeah, yeah, and I think in the Coffeezilla interview, his like rebuttal to this was really telling, where he says that if you buy a 1 foot by 1 foot plot in Scotland, you can use the title Lord, and that gets you treated better at airlines, right? So that's really telling in how he sees that thing as a life hack, which also is a little bit weird and unethical. But he equates that to being able to use doctor and getting yourself credibility on much larger scale than just at airports being treated marginally better. And on that point too, I don't know, like if you're a millionaire and you're getting first class tickets, how much better are they treating you at the airport for being a lord? Like you already get access to all of the amenities at the airport. You get to go in the plane first. You're not going to get a better seat from first class for being a lord. So I don't completely understand that point either.
I don't remember. Do you remember if that discussion about the Lord title was that in the Coffeezilla interview or not?
Yeah, yeah, I believe
It,
it
it
was.
was. So I specifically, the part about that stood out to me the most was when he talked about the Lord title, he literally called it a life hack. And when he was talking about it, it's I got the sense that I got the sense that he thought he was a genius for figuring out that life
Yeah,
hack.
yeah.
If you go with Lord, you'll get treated better in the airport, you'll get treated better in life. And so I thought that was super weird, but I also thought it was kind of funny. Me personally, I've never thought about using titles to change the way I'm treated, but I've definitely used back in the day when I'd sign up for like an American Airlines mileage card. I would literally just use the title like Lord just to see if I'd actually get that be addressed that way in the mail. And I didn't do it because I wanted to be treated differently. I just did it that because I thought it was funny. Like how many people actually select that option? Apparently, Evan Luthra does for better treatment at the airport. But yeah,
Yeah, and I think like the even bigger life hack is like if you really think it would get you something by using Lord, just use Lord. No one at the airport is going to be like, show me your deed for your 1 by 1 plot in Scotland to prove
yeah,
that you're a Lord before I treat you back.
that's so funny.
So
Oh, before we go too further along, so according to Evan Luthra, he's a doctor. He's a doctor. He obviously knows his way around life hacks. One thing we don't. So Akil and I are doing a screen share of like all the talking points we have. One thing we don't have written down is his claim to being one of the first investors on Snapchat. I want
right.
to I want to make sure we get to that because when I first read that comment about him being so on the internet, I read that he was one of the first investors on Snapchat. I interpreted that as wow, Evan. I don't even think it was one of the first. I think it was actually the
Right,
first
right.
investor on Snapchat. So it's not one of the first; it's the first. So naturally, I'm like, holy crap, how is he not more known if he's the first investor in Snapchat? And I did all the Googling I could, and I found so many names on Crunchbase, so many VCs that were involved as like one of the earliest investors in Snapchat, um, of which, of course, like I didn't see Evan Luthra or his larger holding, I think EL Group, on there. So then I was like, well, why would then I started wondering, well, why would Snapchat let Evan Luthra be the first investor and not even like credit him? And then what Akil did was he clarified that claim for me. So I'll let Akil kind
Yeah.
of speak to that.
Let's get into that a little bit, right? So it's on his website, evanluthra.com. It says, from being the first investor over Snapchat to an early investor in ease.com and Wheelie's Cafe, right? So let's get into each of these three because I feel like they're all fascinating in their own respects. From being the first investor over Snapchat, I dug into that and I found out what that exactly means. And it's purposefully misleading, right? Unless you like really look at the grammar he's using here. He says over Snapchat, right? So it seems I thought the same, like he must be the first investor in Snapchat. That must be why he has some form of notoriety. And I tried looking this up too, and it was really hard to find this information. But he was actually the first investor to complete a deal on Snapchat. So while he was drunk at a club, someone added him on Snapchat, pitched them their idea, and he agreed to invest their idea via Snapchat. That's what
So,
that one it says.
so like, there's a couple things. So when you told me about investing over Snapchat, I gave the benefit of the doubt that since English is presumably not his first language, maybe when he is translating how he thinks in maybe Hindi or Punjabi, it translates into over Snapchat instead of in Snapchat. Turns
Right.
out I was wrong. So that's one thing. The second thing is, how do you even prove that somebody like this is another one of those things where he, somebody can make a claim that they were the first to do something, but there's nothing I can find online that would otherwise negate that because I assume that Snapchat doesn't actively monitor all the investment deals happening over their platform. So based on that, there's no way for me to actually invalidate that. Nonetheless, this another once again seems like an embellished claim.
Yeah, plus like it's just not something that normal people would brag about. So it's not something you're gonna Google and find other people saying they all did it to see if someone did it earlier than him, right? It's a really like outlandish thing to care about.
Yeah, I agree. And then what was the
So
other one? Ease or whatever?
yeah, the second part is to an early investor in ease.com. Ease.com is a marijuana startup online. Right now they're not doing so hot, but basically what I took out of this is he invested via AngelList. And this is just a theory. There's no like fact behind this, but judging by like his history that we've kind of plotted out here, I think he wanted to make his portfolio look better. We'll get a little bit into why his portfolio doesn't look that great in things that he's invested in a little bit. But I think he wanted to make it look better. He saw the opportunity that ease.com was looking for investments from anyone via AngelList. So basically, via AngelList, I believe you can give anyone investment for a small share of their company and not have voting rights, and then be able to use that company on your portfolio on AngelList, which I basically think is what he did in order to get a reputable company onto his portfolio there. Um, and even like early investor in this context has my ears perk up and be a little bit skeptical, right? Because early is a comparative term. So compared to now, it could be early, but it might already be after they had proven some level of success and it wasn't that much of a risk to invest X amount of money to get them on your portfolio.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like for example, um, so look if we look at crypto, for example, like Bitcoin and Ethereum. So Bitcoin specifically, I think first came out in 2009, and then there was like different cohorts of buyers, the 09ers, the people that bought around 2013, then the people that bought around 2017. I'm from that 2017 cohort, but I still consider the people from like the 2013 cohort to be like early early buyers, and then those 2013ers might not consider themselves, early adopters. They might say like the 09ers were early adopters. So I agree, it's totally relative, this concept of approximating, what's late, what's early.
Right, right. And then the last one, I don't have too much context on Willie's Cafe. Other than that, it's out of business currently.
Yeah.
that was that was the last one out of the three of those there, which are all pretty fascinating, I think. Um, embellished claims, some more embellished than the others. The other thing that goes on to this, and I think is more applicable to the honorary doctorate and Lord Lifehack, is his like net worth page. So there are websites where I think it's basically crowdsourced information on like celebrity information and celebrity net worth. Um, and Cam had found this clip of someone referring to him as a billionaire interview. Do you want to just give the context behind that clip quickly?
Yeah, so I stumbled upon this YouTube video. It was an interview. I think it took place in Russia at some sort of like crypto conference back in like 2017 or 18. And this is like the one thing where I give Evan like full credit on. The interviewer introduces him as a billionaire, and he actually corrects her, and he says, "Oh, I'm not a billionaire, millionaire." And so I will say, out of all the things I couldn't find to support his the positive claims he makes about himself, I did see like, see that there's at least one time on the internet where he did an embellishment about himself and like downgraded himself. So I wanted to just give credit to that.
Yeah, yeah. It was like the one drop of humility I think I've seen in anything I've seen
Yeah,
from him.
I was like,
But
holy shit! I had to replay it like twice just to make sure I. Then I replayed it. Then I actually went online to see his net worth, and I found more things that supported him being a millionaire versus a billionaire. So then I was like, okay, like him kind of downgrading that reporter's or that interviewer's assumption seems legit. So
yeah, yeah. But back to the celeb net worth thing I was talking about, that's crowdsourced. It says he collected an excellent amount of money from his successful career, thus he has an estimated net worth of $1 billion.
oh
Now,
what?
why that's interesting to me is that this is crowdsourced information, and under body measurement category, I don't even know why that's a category on celebrity net worth, but it says he is a handsome man with a tall and fit body figure. Similarly, he stands at an average height and has maintained a fit and healthy body. Furthermore, he looks more handsome and attractive man with black colored eyes and black natural hair.
I
That
feel
makes
like
me think. Sorry.
those are like three separate sentences, yet they all sound like they're saying the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And like, to me, this either has to be written by Evan Luthra or like a super fan of Evan Luthra. And I tried looking like any celebrity that has a super fan, they would basically have like a fan page on Instagram.
Oh,
The
sure,
only,
yeah.
yeah, the only things I've found on Instagram are Evan Luthra is a fraud, Dr. Evan scammed Luthra, Evan's a loser, Evan Luthra is a fake. There is nothing positive in any profile here. So if someone was willing to take the effort of making a celeb network page, I would imagine they would also make a fan page about him as well. So something screams to me about a little manipulation from him or his team onto his public image there also.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't need that. So that page also mentions he's a self-made billionaire, but then I think in interviews what I gathered was he was a byproduct of his dad's like failed technology or call center business, something like that. So
Yeah,
they're kind
yeah,
of like whatever. I don't know who put that page together, but it's definitely not consistent with other things that both Evan has said and then the internet has said.
yeah, exactly. So we'll leave off that section with that point. We're gonna jump into Startup Studio, I believe it's called. Which
Yeah.
do you remember? Let me look it up really quick. I want to have this available. I believe it's startupstudio.co.in, but I could be wrong.
We're doing a Google search on the screen share for people. Well, nobody that's listening will
Startup
be able to see the screen share. So
startupstudio.online. So this is fun, and I'm a little bit tempted to just like think of an idea that's passable as a real idea, and just try and go through the process and see what it looks like for a good time. But basically, a little context behind this quote unquote incubator he has. He has historically taken ideas at the very infant idea stage. So as soon as someone gets an idea that pops in their head and they haven't done any extra effort from that phase, they will basically go to Dr. Evan Luthra here and tell him this idea. He will respond back saying, I will give you $500,000 for 20% of your company. To know that you have some skin in the game, I want you to contribute $100,000 to the company. And then we will take that $600,000 and I will get this developed in India for you. Right? So, did you have thoughts you wanted to add before I move on?
oh no. I'm just kind of following along.
Yeah, yeah. So, there's a few things that scream out to me here. Number one, not allowing the CEO that had the idea that you're investing in to choose their own development company is very, very odd and manipulative in and of itself, right? No other
Right.
investor is going to be like, you have to use our investment company to do this unless it was a bit of a scam. Um, Secondly, for an MVP, and if you guys don't know that, minimum viable product, basically anytime you have a startup idea, you want to get the smallest amount of effort to create some sort of product done to test your idea and see if it's useful, if it's something people would pay for, if it is the theory that you had in your head that this would be successful, if it proves at any certain level, right? So for it to cost $600,000 just for that experimental stage is outlandish, right? You're better off putting your $100,000 on the roulette table than you are at going even $100,000 deep on an MVP level at this stage, I think, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
like this is an idea that has this means we haven't even validated the idea. We don't know if anybody's even willing to pay any money for this. And so in this scenario, you'd be spending $600,000 to find out if there's any demand for this idea in the market, like consumer market or business market.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Which, I mean, it's pretty outlandish just from that itself. And then put those things together with him demanding you use like his development company. What that screams to me is just that this product is costing reasonably, I would say like 25 grand. Even that might be a little bit on the high end. And I'm pocketing the rest of it. So if you do become successful, then I have a 20% stake in a successful company, but more likely you're not, and I just made $75,000 off of your $100,000 investment.
Yeah, this sounds basically like super asymmetrical, meaning it's all the risk is it's bared by the idea person, and then
Right.
in this scenario, if the idea never comes to fruition, then startup studio gets to keep whatever the difference is between what they take from the idea person and what they and their actual labor, or if like yeah, the other scenarios where like the idea takes off and then he gets a stake in it and then probably puts it up under his like angel list investor profile.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And one thing I just want to clarify on, I might not have made it clear. The person who came up with the idea never actually sees that $500,000. It's going straight to development costs, which is his own development company. right? Which is what
Yeah.
makes this extremely, extremely shady, right? And you can go through his, I don't know, track record, I guess, on his website. Most of the investments he has listed, the links that he has to them are dead. You can look at them in the App Store. At most, they have one review, and out of the 1 out of 3 that I've seen have one review, that one review was by an E. Luthra, which how many E. Luthras are there in the world?
Right. That's true. Yeah, we had tried to click through like I think like the first 5 or 6. Um, so Evan has basically like a series of logos of all the companies he's apparently invested in. I think we clicked on like the first 5 or 6, and of those 5 or 6, I think almost all of them were either dead links or they were out of business. Maybe there was like one where the site suggests that they're still in business, but who even knows? Like seeing how many dead sites and dead links we were getting linked to from the site, it's like not really even clear to us if if these sites are actually like maintained and are a actual proper representation of whether these businesses are alive or not and successful or not.
Yeah, yeah. And to give him credit, in the Coffeezilla interview when discussing this, he kind of says things that have like a sliver of truth, but Coffeezilla never pressed him on the MVP part. Part that has a sliver of truth is as an incubator, where I see my success is if even of these if one company out of the 10 that I invested in goes 100x, then I'm profitable, right? Which, to be honest, is a strategy that a lot of like incubator programs use. But the problem is when you take ideas this early on, you're not going to get 1 in 10 being successful, right? Like there's so much that goes into being a successful startup. That's why incubator programs take more mature companies and then help them. So there's a higher probability of them going 100x, right? When it's just an idea, that's a 0 to none chance that you're ever going to see value on that investment.
Yeah, like so based on my limited experience working at startups, which I almost have zero. And based on the many startup podcasts that I listen to, the common theme that I gather for like even these incubators that are for like small startups that aren't looking to be billionaires or $1 billion companies or unicorns, they're often looking for you have product market fit, you have a certain amount of dollars you're bringing in every month in recurring revenue. And even then, like there's anticipation for a lot of failure. So I do think, yeah, that kind of return on basically just an idea seems uh, unusual.
Yeah, yeah. I've gone through a bunch of incubator interviews. I've been through an incubator with a startup that I co-founded, and all of those pretty much had the same theme. They expect you to at least have users using your product already, which means the MVP would already be done, right? So when you're even pre-MVP, pre-doing any work, and literally you just have this like 1 to 2 sentence idea, that's literally not like it's not worth anything at that early of a stage until you have had at least some success in implementing it.
Yeah, some proof of dollars
Right,
essentially.
right. Exactly.
So cool.
Awesome.
I think that covers all of the items we had listed out. Did you have anything else you wanted to get out before we wrap this pod up?
No, no, I don't think so. I think I've gotten everything off my chest, and I hope everyone enjoyed our little deep dive that we had here into Evan Luthra.
Yeah, so if anybody has any uh, personalities in the tech space or companies that you're wondering about, curious about, kind of want some more information about them, shoot us a message on this pod. We're happy to do some research, and if we find anything of value, we can discuss it further, discuss our findings, kind of like we did with Evan Luthra. But I think that's it.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks everyone for tuning